I was standing under the buzzing fluorescent lights of a gas station, the kind of late-night stop where time feels suspended, when he approached me. His jacket was 3 sizes too big, his beard was wild, and his eyes carried that mix of exhaustion and defiance you see in people who've been invisible for too long. Can I just use your phone for a minute?" he asked. Now, if you've ever been asked that, you know the storm of hesitation that comes with it. Your brain flashes through headlines, cautionary tales, and that instinctive urge to guard your belongings. But then there's the human part of you, the part that knows what it feels like to need help and not want to beg for it. I don't know what it was about his voice, maybe the way it cracked on the word phone, but I found myself unlocking the screen and handing it over. My thumb hovered for half a second too long, like it was holding on to trust itself, and then I let go. He dialed quickly, pressing the phone close to his ear. His conversation was short, urgent, and private. I heard fragments. "I'm trying. Man, just give me time. I'll get there." He thanked me 3 times before giving it back, almost bowing as he shuffled away into the night. I didn't think much of it after that. Honestly, I expected the moment to dissolve, like most random encounters do. But 2 weeks later, 2 weeks to the day, I was sitting in the lobby of a corporate office, rehearsing answers to questions like, "What's your greatest weakness?" when the glass doors opened. And there he was, the same man, clean-shaven this time, wearing a pressed shirt, carrying a folder. He looked directly at me, recognition flickering across his face. And in that instant, the story I thought was mine became something else entirely. Because this wasn't just coincidence. This was the beginning of a chain reaction I never saw coming. The receptionist called my name, but my focus was locked on him. The homeless man, or at least the man I had met at the gas station, was standing tall now, shoulders squared, like he had stepped out of one reality and into another. And the strangest part? Nobody else in the lobby seemed to notice the transformation. 2 weeks earlier, he had been a shadow on the edge of a parking lot, his voice shaky, his hands trembling around my phone. Now, he looked like someone who belonged in that building, like someone who had fought his way back to respectability. My heart was hammering, and not because of the job interview. Something in me whispered that what had happened at that gas station was not a random act. It was a thread, pulling us both toward this moment. I tried to focus, to steady my breathing as the receptionist guided me to a glass-walled conference room. But the image of him lingered. What had he said on that phone call? Who had he been reaching out to? And why? Of all places, of all days, did he walk through that door right when my own future was hanging in the balance? The interview began. I shook hands, answered questions, tried to sound confident while inside I was spiraling. Because every time I glanced at the hallway, I saw him waiting, clutching his folder like it was his ticket to a different life. I realized then, this wasn't just about me chasing a job. It was about 2 people colliding at the crossroads of chance and choice. And the rules of this story, whatever they were only just beginning to unfold. The first rule of moments like these is simple: nothing is coincidence. At least, that's what I started to believe the longer I sat in that chair, answering questions while my eyes kept flicking toward the man in the hallway. Because here's the truth. When a stranger asks to use your phone, you never expect to see them again. You don't expect their life to intersect with yours in any meaningful way. You tell yourself it was kindness, a blip, a fragment. But then, if fate has other plans, you realize you've stepped onto a path you didn't even know existed. The second rule: once you give someone a piece of your story, you can't take it back. That night at the gas station, I gave him access not just to my phone, but to something more fragile, my trust. And now, sitting in that interview, it felt like that trust had boomeranged back at me in a form I couldn't ignore. The third rule was the hardest. You don't get to decide when the past comes knocking. It chooses you. It shows up when you least expect it, dressed in a pressed shirt and holding a manila folder, ready to rewrite your understanding of everything. The hiring manager asked me about teamwork, but my brain was running circles around the why. Why did he need my phone? Why was he here, now of all places? And most dangerously, what would happen if our stories collided in front of the very people deciding my future? It felt like sitting in a puzzle without all the pieces, and the more I tried to focus on the interview, the more I realized I wasn't just competing for a job anymore. I was about to uncover what my act of kindness had really set into motion. After the interview wrapped, I stepped out of the conference room, my pulse still drumming in my ears. And there he was, closer now, the man I'd lent my phone to. For a split second, neither of us spoke. His eyes searched mine, as if confirming I was real, that I wasn't just a trick of memory. Then he gave me the smallest nod, like a silent acknowledgement of a shared secret. But here's where the puzzle began. He didn't approach me. He didn't smile, didn't thank me again, didn't even whisper a word. Instead, he turned his attention back to the receptionist, gave his name, and handed over his folder. Like we were strangers. Like nothing had ever happened. And that's when my mind started tearing itself apart with questions. Was I supposed to say something first? Was this some kind of test of character? An invisible line connecting us that only I could feel? Or worse, had he used my phone that night for something I didn't want to know about? Every time I replayed the gas station scene in my head, new details surfaced. The urgency in his voice. The way his shoulders had sagged when the call ended. The way he thanked me 3 times, almost desperate. Was he calling family? An old boss? Someone who could give him a way out? And now here he was, standing in the same building where I was fighting for a chance at stability, too. The puzzle wasn't just why he was here, it was what role he played in my story. Was he competition? Was he an omen? Or was he something stranger, something I couldn't yet define? Because as I watched him disappear into another conference room down the hall, a single thought echoed in my head. What if I hadn't let him use my phone that night? Would either of us be standing here at all? I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling back to him. The way he'd looked at me, recognition without words. The way he'd slipped into that conference room, like fate had a cruel sense of humor. By morning, my curiosity had boiled into something heavier, obsession. I needed to know who he was. Not the man at the gas station, not the shadow with trembling hands, but the version of him who now sat across the same hiring table as me. So I did what anyone living in the 21st century does. I Googled. I replayed our brief encounter in my head, over and over, until I remembered the name he'd whispered into my phone that night. Marcus. Just one word, but it was enough. And when the search results appeared, I froze. Marcus had a LinkedIn profile. A clean headshot, a polished summary. He wasn't just anyone. He had once been a project manager for a mid-sized tech company, with years of experience under his belt. But then the timeline stopped cold about 18 months ago. No updates. No new jobs. Just silence. That silence now had a face. The gaunt, weary man I'd met at the gas station. The revelation hit me like a punch. Marcus wasn't some stranger spiraling at the edges of society. He had been someone. He had built a life, a career, a name. And then, for reasons I didn't yet understand, it had all collapsed. But here's the twist that stole my breath. The company he once worked for? It was the same one I was interviewing with. The same logo I had seen glowing on the glass doors. He wasn't just here for a job. He was here to reclaim a piece of the life he had lost. And suddenly, I realized the real question wasn't whether I would get the position. It was whether Marcus's return would change the game entirely, for both of us. The following week was torture. Every day, I refreshed my email, waiting for some word from the company. An invitation. A rejection. Anything. But silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Meanwhile, Marcus haunted me. Not just the memory of him, but the reality. I spotted him twice more, once at a coffee shop near downtown, once boarding the same bus I took home. Each time, our eyes met. Each time, neither of us spoke. It was like we were orbiting the same secret, afraid of what might happen if we collided. And then came the email. Subject line, final interview invitation. My chest swelled with relief until I read further. The interview was scheduled for the same day, same time slot as a second-round candidate for the same role. It didn't take much to guess who that was. Complication after complication stacked like dominoes. I'd been preparing answers about teamwork, problem-solving, leadership, but now the unspoken problem was Marcus. Would the hiring managers see him as the man he used to be, or the man I'd met outside a gas station, broken and desperate? And worse, would they see me as his mirror, someone standing on the edge of my own collapse? Because the truth was, my own life wasn't as stable as I wanted to pretend. I'd been laid off months earlier. Rent was late. My car was one breakdown away from disaster. Helping Marcus had been an act of generosity, yes, but it had also been a glimpse of a road I was terrified I might one day walk myself. The complications weren't just external. They were inside me. Every doubt I had about my own worth, my own resilience, grew louder as the final interview loomed. And hanging over it all was one impossible question. If it came down to me or Marcus, who deserved the chance more? The day of the final interview arrived with a weight in my chest that felt like stone. I wore my best shirt, pressed and repressed it 3 times, but it couldn't iron out the knot in my stomach. When I walked into the conference room, there he was, Marcus, already seated across the table, his manila folder laid out neatly, his posture steady. But I could see it, the faint tremor in his hands, the way his jaw clenched when the panel of managers shuffled their notes. He was holding himself together by threads. And then it began. The first question went to Marcus. He spoke clearly, articulately, describing past projects he had led, teams he had mentored. His voice was smoother than I remembered, but beneath it, I could still hear the echo of the man who had once begged me for a phone call in the shadows of a gas station. Then it was my turn. I tried to match his confidence, to prove that I was just as capable. But the room felt smaller with him there, the air denser, like every word I spoke was being measured against his. Back and forth it went. Him, then me. His successes, my ambitions, his redemption story, my need for a chance. And then came the question that cracked the surface. One of the managers leaned forward and asked, "Tell us about a time when someone else's actions changed the trajectory of your career." The silence was electric. My throat went dry, because how could I answer that without giving Marcus away? Without revealing the gas station, the phone, the fragile bridge between us? I glanced at him. For the first time that day, he looked directly at me, not as a competitor, but as if daring me to tell the truth. The room waited. My heart pounded. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a reckoning. I took a breath, so deep it felt like diving underwater. The panel was still waiting, pens poised above their notepads. Marcus's gaze was fixed on me, steady and unblinking. And then I spoke. "I don't know if this is the kind of answer you're looking for," I began, my voice shaking. "But a few weeks ago, something happened that reminded me how unpredictable life can be. A stranger asked to borrow my phone at a gas station. I said yes. And that small decision, it changed how I saw people, how I saw myself. I didn't name Marcus. I didn't have to." The words hung heavy, and I could feel the managers shifting in their seats, sensing there was more beneath the surface. I continued. "What it taught me is that opportunity isn't just about talent or preparation. It's about timing, about kindness, about believing in someone when they're at their lowest. And I think leadership, real leadership, is carrying that belief into every decision you make." When I finished, the room was silent. Not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. And then, something happened I'll never forget. Marcus spoke. His voice was calm, grounded, but filled with something raw. I was that stranger. The air cracked like glass. Every head turned toward him. He didn't flinch. He told them everything. How he had lost his job, lost his home, lost almost everything except the hope that one phone call might help him claw back a piece of his life. How my choice to trust him had been the spark he needed to try again. How standing in that room wasn't just an interview for him. It was a resurrection. The managers exchanged glances. One of them even set her pen down, her eyes shining. And me? I sat frozen, torn between fear that I'd just lost my chance and awe at the honesty laid bare in front of me. In that moment, the job didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. I had given Marcus a thread of trust when he was unraveling, and he had turned it into a lifeline strong enough to carry him back here. And maybe, just maybe, that was the legacy of a single, fragile act of kindness. A week later, the email came. I wasn't chosen. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring at the rejection like it was a wound opening in slow motion. But then I read the rest. "Although we've moved forward with another candidate, we were deeply impressed by your honesty, your resilience, and your perspective. Please stay in touch. We'd like to consider you for future opportunities." And I knew who the other candidate was. Marcus. For a heartbeat, jealousy flared. I imagined him walking back into stability, his shirt pressed, his confidence restored, while I stayed behind, still searching. But then I remembered that night, the man with trembling hands, begging for a single chance. And I realized, he had needed this more than I did. Maybe the universe had known that all along. A few days later, I got a message. Not from the company, from Marcus. Just 3 words. "You saved me." I sat there, staring at my phone. The same phone I had handed over at that gas station. The same phone that had carried his desperate voice into the night. And I thought about how fragile the threads of our lives really are, how one small choice can ripple outward, reshaping destinies you didn't even know you were tied to. I didn't get the job, but I got something else. Proof that kindness is never wasted. Proof that sometimes the story isn't about what you gain. It's about what you give and how it echoes in someone else's life. So here's my challenge to you. The next time life asks you to choose between fear and trust, between guarding what's yours and opening your hand, pause. Think, because you never know. The stranger in front of you might just walk back into your story and change it forever.